I remember about maybe 10, 15 years ago, there was a dairy farmer from Durham, Ontario. He's in the news. His name was Michael Schmidt, and he was involved in this legal battle. I think he was eventually found guilty on, I don't know, a dozen and a half charges of selling and distributing raw milk. It's
Right.
not illegal.
Yeah, Michael's a good friend of mine. I was involved in that somewhat. I wrote a position paper and presented it at Queen's Park back in 2008.
So what is the law in Canada? You can, it's legal. You can drink unpasteurized milk. It's just, you can't sell it. It's against the law. Why can't we as
Yeah.
Canadians decide whether we want to buy unpasteurized or pasteurized milk?
Well, it goes back in history to a lot of farmers in the 1800s that were adulterating the milk and creating a lot of problems, unfortunately, for children. And so what happened in the late 1800s is the farmers were feeding the cows swills. So they would get the mash from local distilleries and feed it to the cows, and the cows would get really, really sick, and the milk in turn would be contaminated. And unfortunately, babies who drank that milk could get sick and die. There were a lot of other very unhygienic practices that were going on among these inner city dairies. And so they did have a high infant mortality rate from children who got sick from drinking this swill milk. It was called actually the milk problem. And so when you contrast what was happening to these inner city dairies, in the country, Richard, the cows were still very healthy. The milk was very healthy. People weren't getting sick and dying from this raw milk. And so there's a big difference between the two different types of quality of the raw milk. And unfortunately, they came forward and started pasteurizing the milk and thinking that was the solution to the problem. And really, it's duct taping problem with the way the cow is being raised. And so when you look at farmers like Michael Schmidt, who's doing what I would call sustainable agriculture, very authentic types of farming practices, you're going to see much, much healthier products coming out of his farm than you would a factory farm, not only from a nutrient density standpoint, but also because there'll be a less of a chance of any kind of infection happening because his animals are all out on pasture, getting the fresh air, getting
Okay.
the sunshine, and basically being treated in a very humane way. And in
What are
contrast to these factory farms, yeah.
what are the benefits of drinking raw milk?
Well, you get all the benefits of the microbial environment from the milk. So you're going to get a lot of very favorable bacteria, for example, that are going to help you with your gut diversity. So it's going to help you with your immune system. It's going to help you with your digestion. Yesterday, I spoke to Mark McAfee. He's a CEO and founder of Raw Farm USA, formerly known as Organic Pastures Dairy. And Mark McAfee, he'll admit it. And I know any farmer would admit it, that no food is inherently 100% safe, but people want the raw milk and are educated around the farming practices for these very sustainable types of operations. But they come to people like Mark or come to people like Michael, and they might have a child who has asthma or who has a skin condition or any kind of chronic health condition, and they start drinking raw milk, and a lot of people get well. I'm sure they're doing other things as well, but they tend to enjoy a lot of health benefits from drinking raw milk. Pasteurized milk, of course, is sterilized. It's dead. It hasn't got all this wonderful microbial activity within it. So the enzymes are basically nullified through the heat process. And you don't have that with raw milk. You get all the benefits of the enzymes, of the probiotics, and it's just easier on the digestive system, and it's a much more healthful product.
You mentioned Mark McAfee, and he's in the news, I guess, because Robert F. Kennedy Jr., incoming Health and Human Services Secretary, assuming he is confirmed by the Senate, is talking about Mark McAfee becoming an FDA advisor. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is bullish on raw milk. Do you see the United States maybe loosening the regulations on raw milk and then eventually maybe that happening in Canada?
Yeah, we hope so. I spoke to Mark yesterday, and he's hoping this has a trickle effect into Canada. It really, again, like you said, Richard, it depends on whether or not RFK does get his nomination. He's gone to Mark McAfee. He's asked him if he would be an advisor to the FDA. Mark knows a lot about food safety, and he knows how to improve the safety of our food supply through his own observations in terms of how you're supposed to be raising these animals. And so I'm looking forward to it. I really want to see this liaison happen. I want to see RFK get his position because he knows a lot about nutrition. He knows a lot about natural health. I mean, if you saw his video, he did a reel at Thanksgiving. He was cooking a turkey in beef tallow, I believe it was. So he knows the seed oils are very unhealthy for us. And he knows that the animal fats, they're healthy, they're stable, and they help contribute to a more sustainable agricultural environment. So Robert F. Kennedy knows a lot about natural health. He could contribute to the betterment of our health here in Canada as well, not just in the United States. And so he drinks raw milk. Sally Fallon helped him get access to raw milk in California. And so he's a consumer of raw milk and he's a supporter of raw milk. So we'll see what happens in the coming days, weeks, months. I think a lot of people still have a lot of misinformation in and around raw milk. I don't think people have the correct information because it's something that happens when you have a centralized food system. You know, the people at the top just don't want to let it go. And these small producers are a thorn in their side. They're taking 1%, 2% of their profits away from them, and they don't like it. So they also don't like the fact that in these farms where the animals are healthy, they're a statement, they're a testament to how we should be raising our animals. And they're a threat, essentially, to these larger operations who have very filthy, unethical types of animal husbandry. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I think consumers are demanding more sustainable forms of agriculture. They're demanding more nutrient-dense foods. They know the importance about buying local. I mean, if we don't have these farmers, what's going to happen to us? Are we going to be dependent on an entirely centralized food system where the care is just not there in terms of raising the animals? Or are we going to start deriving more of our food from China? I don't want that. I think people are starting to get more and more aware about the importance of buying from local farmers.
Pam Killeen, health and wellness coach, co-author of The Great Bird Flu Hoax, and host of the Circadian Reboot with Pam Killeen podcast, pamkilleen.com. Killeen is Killeen. Killeen, pamkilleen.com. Pam, thank you so much. We'll talk again next week.
Thanks, Richard.